department can say we don't have the money, but that's a product of political choices, and political choices between this mythology of needing to remain a low tax economy and therefore to cut back services to deal with the deficit rather than to raise taxes. I also take issue as well, I think we need to be careful of an overly labour market focus on lifelong learning, because we don't, in that context, get cradle to grave. We get cradle to end of labour market usefulness education, and that's why we don't see older people in any of the priorities enunciated for Europe or for Ireland. In terms of the actual question then, what do we need to do? I suppose one thing we'd start by being wary about believing too much about what we see in the papers and trying to interpret behind what happens in relation to the announcement of new investments, because behind that there's always an amount of money that's already invested in that area and is not really new, and behind that there's a cutback in another area, and it's a moving of funds rather than new funds. But that's beside the point as well. The key bit, I think we do need to shift thinking first and foremost from equity to equality. We need to shift from a concern with being fair, which is very deep in Irish culture in a way, to a concern with actually achieving change, which is not so deep in Irish culture, that we don't have the same commitment to equality as we do to fairness. So there needs to be a shift in thinking. Practice-wise, I think the biggest thing is building trust and developing organisations that are equality friendly, that are diversity friendly, and therefore that don't discriminate, that do relate well, that do engage with communities in their life rather than communities engaging in the life of the institutions. But I think the key thing at the end of the day is will and leadership. That if the will isn't there and the leadership isn't there, it's not about money. I agree. It's about will and leadership. How do we want to use the resources we have? Who do we want to benefit? And what's the thinking that informs that? If it's purely labour market and the need to show immediate labour market outcomes, it won't be about equality. If it's about life and participation in society and participation in the labour market, that's probably a better starting point. But it's about equality and outcomes rather than fairness and opportunities. And crucial to that is dialogue and trust. And central to that again is the thing that's been bubbling around, is the ability of the community sector to bring forward the interests, to articulate those interests, to bring forward the voice and to articulate the voice of communities that experience disadvantage, that are excluded, and that are distant not just from the labour market, but distant from the institutions responsible for bridging that gap.
Okay. Thank you, Neil. There's one last question in the corner, and then we're going to turn to there's two, is there? There's two. And then we'll turn to the DVD. Hi.
My name's Orla Layden. I'm a county councillor with Roscommon County Council and chairperson of County Roscommon VC. Neil spoke about two things that I'd like to pick upon, the whole area of challenges that are facing lifelong learning and the whole issue of vilifying the public service. And I'd just like to make people aware, I'd say a lot of people are already aware of the threat that's there to the VEC sector that's delivering adult and community education. There's proposals to reduce the number of VECs from 33 to 22. This would affect in particular a number of rural counties, including my own of Roscommon, Sligo, Leitrim, Longford. If this happens, this is going to result in inequality in these areas. It's going to mean that people will not be able to access relevant courses. The VCs will no longer be responsive to their individual county needs, and the interagency work that has happened between VCs and community groups, childcare committees, county development boards, integrated development companies, that will cease as it exists. And I think this is a real challenge, that a whole campaign should be led to oppose the proposals that are certainly there and need to be fought at this time before something drastic happens. Thanks.
Okay. I wonder, can I turn to our on the balcony table, which is beside me here. I'm not going to eyeball anybody. And remember their role, as Professor Cook, whoops, sorry, I've touched this. Is that okay? As he alluded to this morning, is to transcend agendas and to maybe be the wise, I won't say elders, because that's a bit, the wise, detached, I suppose. Sometimes to detach ourselves from the issues is worthy and worthwhile. So I don't know if I'm putting them on the spot, but does anyone on the table here beside me want to make a comment, an observation, a provocative statement, or pose a question.
And to give them a chance to reflect
Yes,
on that,
thank you, Kathy.
can I make a brief point?
Very brief, yes.
Grace mentioned that there are 2,000 disaffected young people unemployed in Clondalkin. Okay, Clondalkin has lost 2 community development projects. It costs more to keep a young man in prison than it does for the annual cost of a community development project. Where is the sense in that? There's absolutely no sense in closing down a community development project that can work with those young people, but it's, you know, the money to keep them in prison is a given. I just wanted to make that brief point and give your balcony bells a chance now.
Thank you, Kathleen. Okay, I'm going to turn to Anne Clark. Here's the microphone for you, Anne.
Thank you, Anne. I'm sitting here trying to put my evaluator hat aside and be not get involved too deeply in what people are saying in terms of trying to take sides. However, I suppose in terms of commenting on what people are saying, fear seems to be kind of ruling the room a little bit at the moment. And I would hope that this afternoon we'd be a little bit more positive and constructive in how we address the issue of lifelong learning. The other thing I suppose that comes across is that we seem to be muddling the concept of learning with education. And I think learning is much broader than just the formal education system and the institutions which actually deliver that education. And I think we need to bear that in mind when we're discussing lifelong learning. They'd be the 2 comments I'd have just for the moment.
Thank you, Anne. Thank you.
Maddie and Cry.